Hey guys, I'm Jennifer Jenkins, the senior graduate student in Roberts-Galbraith lab. Today I'm going to be talking about feeding your animals, which is something that can sometimes be kind of tedious and people like to push it off. But it's important for you to keep up these feedings and to be treating your animals with respect because they are animals and have inherent value. But they're also why we have a job and why we can pursue some of these really cool questions that I'm sure you'll dive more into when you talk to Rachel and to other people in the lab. All right, let's get started. The first thing you want to do is get your food. We feed them beef liver paste and keep our long-term stock in food in the minus 80 degree freezer on the second from bottom shelf. Typically you'll see a dish like this, which is the amount that I needed on this day. But there's also frozen aliquots in tubes and larger batches in syringes. You'll want to coordinate with other lab mates before you thaw one of these. The food will have dates written on them, which is when they've been thawed in the past. If it has 2 dates, it can only be used right after it's thawed once more. We have this spot here on top of the water bath for thawing food. While you're waiting, you can get your animals out and ready. They're kept in an incubator about 18 degrees Celsius in Ziploc containers, with the top lifted in the corner to allow oxygen flow. We label them with their source, which is the Stowers Institute, their strain, this one's asexual, your name and number. You also label each time you perform maintenance for the animals. Here, F stands for feed and wash, and W stands for plain wash. And you want to go get some trays from the front room sink and place them on top of the containers to give the animals shade, because they display negative phototaxis and get stressed with too much light, which I can totally relate to. I'll usually add a little extra protection on the sides to be nice. Alright, now to check on our food. As you can see, there's still a little frozen bit in the middle, so it needs more time. But once I let it sit a little longer, it's shiny and thawed all the way through. So to feed the animals, you need a tool to push the food into the water in a controlled manner. Some use glass pipettes, but I use pipette tips because it feels less expensive. This takes a little practice, but you get used to it quickly. You just use your tip to gather some food to the side and slide it out of the dish so that it plops down into the water of the container. This food was processed really well, so it falls down. But if you're having trouble with the food floating, feel free to ask one of us for help. The liver isn't a biohazard, but just so that we don't freak out the cleaning crew, we usually tuck it into our gloves like so before disposing of it. In a few minutes, the animals will bunch around the food because they're hungry. Then after about an hour, they've basically finished eating. So you want to get rid of the excess liver. You'll need a general liquid waste container and transfer pipettes. You get transfer pipettes from this box next to the sinks, and just make sure that you close it afterwards. Take the transfer pipette and gently remove animals from the clumps of food. Once you're sure you've got most of them, go ahead and suck up the food and dispose of it in your liquid waste container. Then go through and get the remaining debris. Make sure not to use the same transfer pipette for multiple buckets, because this can cross-contaminate them if the animals are sick in one of them. Use a fresh transfer pipette for each bucket. After you remove the food, it's time to wash your animals in buckets. For this, you'll need a squirt bottle of 1x Montjuic salts. Make sure you're using 1x and not 0.75x. These can be found around the lab next to the sinks, and also you may get your own bottle. Here's mine. As you can see, it's been through a lot. You'll also need a secondary container, which are found next to the sink in the front room. Make sure not to use one with an X written on it. Once you have those things along with your transfer pipettes and liquid to waste container, you'll lean over the sink and slowly drain the bucket. The animals will sometimes float on the top of the water, and to get them to the bottom of the bucket, just gently suck them into the pipette and push them down. They usually drop down and secure themselves. You want to make sure to not let them go down the drain because these are not native animals and we don't want to endanger the local environment. After the liquid is removed, you'll use your squirt bottle to gather all the worms to one corner of the bucket. They usually move pretty easily. If they're being super sticky, that can be a sign that they're not healthy. Remove the liquid and then give the worms a thorough rinse. Then drain again. Repeat this rinsing step 3 times. Next, transfer the worms to your secondary container and fill it with more 1x Montjuic salts. You'll see these carboys throughout the lab. Once the worms are comfortable in their filled secondary container, you can wash their bucket, which probably has some buildup from their secreted mucus. Super appetizing. Give the bucket a rinse of deionized water, which comes from the special spigots and not just the plain sink. Wet down a paper towel and roughly wipe each surface on the inside of your bucket. We don't use soap, so we get it clean by roughing it up a bit. Repeat this step 1 more time. Then rinse the bucket with a little super pure water, which comes from this Elga machine. You just tap it and twist the knob, and the water comes out. Sometimes the machine will be asleep and say analytic on the display. To wake it up, you just give the knob a little tap. After super pure rinsing, thoroughly dry the bucket with dry paper towels. Then rinse the bucket lid with deionized water and dry it by wiping it down. Now get your secondary container of animals. Push any floating at the top to the bottom of the container and drain. Gather them all to the corner like before and thoroughly rinse them twice. Then transfer your cleaned animals into your cleaned bucket and fill it with more 1x Montjuic salts. I'll normally take it up to the 4-cup line. Then make sure to write what you did that day and the date on the lid. Now you want to clean your secondary container. You'll give it a rinse of deionized water and wipe the sides like you did with the original. And then you'll give it a rinse of super pure water. And for extra protection, you can coat the sides with ethanol and let it air dry. Lastly, we sometimes treat the liquid with antibiotics when the animals are sick or we haven't been able to clean them as much as we like, such as during this pandemic. The antibiotic we use is found in the 4°C fridge and is called gentamicin. I've done the math for the 1 to 1,000 dilution it needs, and from 4 cups, that's about 950 milliliters, so I add 950 microliters of gentamicin. And after that, you're basically done. So I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.